I gotta say, rarely have I ever been quite so happy to receive a sponsor email as I was when Scalextric got in touch. In spite of the fact that I, like nobody, can pronounce the damn thing, Scalextric, I think, is the correct way of doing it. This is the stuff of childhood and fully grown adult dreams. There's just something inherently satisfying about this. So if you're stuck wondering what to buy child or husband, father or grandfather for Christmas, get this. And there's a reason I chose to use this video to introduce this, because you see, this is where for a lot of us it starts, this lifelong obsession that we develop with the automobile. It is opening something like this on Christmas Day that can set somebody up for life, can develop a passion for the car in general, and sometimes a much more specific one for perhaps a brand or maybe even a model. And I know a great many people who lust after one particular car because of something like this. That one day back in 1992, they got a Christmas present, or they saw in their favorite magazine this car, and from that moment on, nothing else would do. And so you would like to think when the moment finally comes to actually get your dream car that it would be everything that you expect it to be, or at the very least everything that the seller says it is, particularly when it's not some dodgy back alley garage that's got your dream car. It is a well-known and reputable seller in an historic setting. But unfortunately, as we're going to see today, that is not always the case. And for a very, very long time, auction houses, not just in Britain, but across the world, have been hiding behind things like caveat emptor, buyer beware. And you know what? I'm tired of that. So today, I'm going to shine a light on an example of a car that really should be brilliant, but I just don't think is right. Want to know more? Well, stay tuned for today's episode of JM on Cars. Now, if you're just wondering what it is that I want for Christmas, well, it just so happens we are approaching 400,000 subscribers. So you can get me something. If you haven't already, hit that like and subscribe button down below. It costs you nothing, but it can change somebody's life. And it has changed mine, to the point where now I am able to, on occasion, go out and not just drive my dream cars, but sometimes buy them too. And just recently, a very good friend of mine, Chris, also found himself in a similar position. And for a long, long time, Chris has been on the hunt for a Porsche Boxster. For a couple of years now, we've been discussing which one it is that he should buy. We've test driven a few and then it's never quite worked out. But just recently he said, actually, I may have a little bit more than Boxster budget. And one car he has always lusted after is the Ferrari 360 Spider. Now, I recently got to drive an example of the 360 Spider in manual with the bucket seats, which would be my dream spec, on the channel. And it was a car that really lived up to expectations. It's fantastic. It's everything an old school naturally aspirated supercar should be. Sounds great, looks, I think, now better than ever, and it still goes well too. It's also mechanical and engaging in that way that old-fashioned supercars and cars always were. And thanks to an extraordinarily generous owner, Chris himself actually got to have a go of the 360 too. And as soon as he did, he said the same as me. Yeah, you know what? The Boxster is a great car. In terms of value for money, you can't beat it. But there is something special about the Ferrari. But with particular requirements, and not many of these ever being for sale, we both started hitting the classifieds and looking to see when and where a suitable example might crop up. We missed out on a couple, and then one day he sent me this link, which I will now share with you. It was for an auction at Historics over at Brooklands. They had a bunch of different cars, some quite nice stuff in there, and nestled amongst them was this 2004 Ferrari 360 Spider. Not in the perfect colour, black on black, but the Nero Daytona, same as I have on my Scuderia, is a nice shade when the sun is out and the car is clean, has a lovely kind of bronzy fleck to it. I'm not a fan of the challenge wheels on this, but you know what? Wheels are easily changed. Most importantly for him though, it wasn't red. That was one of his requirements, and you know, I'm fine with that. Red is not the 360's strongest colour. Looks great, as they all do. Has the bucket seats, and at a quick glance you go, yeah, cool, looks okay. One thing did catch my eye, which is the fact that the exhaust in the back of the car, you can see there, doesn't look too tidy. Looks like it's been a little bit corroded. And this is something that's easy to be sorted, but did ring a couple of alarm bells when I saw the mileage, which is advertised at 20,924. Not unheard of for a 360. Note here also, it looks like maybe is that some cobwebs or something over one of the chassis plates, but it's got the seats that I'd like, some nice contrast stitching. Roof appears to be okay in the distance shots they've given you of it. You can see that the airbag cover starting to flake off a little bit. Again, common 360 thing. It can be sorted, but a little bit unusual. So, okay, well, let's have a look. They estimate this car is going to go for between £66,000 and £75,000. That's strong, particularly in this market. Maybe a couple of years ago, 2 years ago, perhaps it might have had a chance. It's a later example of a 360. For some, that's a good thing. For some, it's not. You've got the reg number and chassis number here, and I'm happy sharing those because this was all public information. This is out there for anybody and everybody to see. The description gives you all the stuff that you would want to know. It's fairly basic, so it tells you this is the open-top version of the 360 Modern. It's lovely, stylish. It's the final year, 2004. The Stradale did get produced for a little bit after. 3.6 litre V8, 400 horsepower, all this good stuff, and tells you some of the options you could have had, like the F1 gearbox, the fact it's made out of aluminium as opposed to its predecessor, the 355, and talks about how wonderful it is. That's the general 360 stuff. Then at the bottom we've got this specific stuff. Originally registered on the 3rd of March 2004, this handsome Ferrari is finished in black with black interior and yellow stitching. It's recently been serviced and the cam belts were changed at the same time along with the front ball joints. I mean, that's good news because cam belts, it's not as expensive as on a 355, but it's still a £700 to £1,000 job at least. Ball joints, 360s, 430s, they're notorious for them. If you've watched any of my videos on my 430, you'll know it's a big problem. More than that, it's explained here that the car was recommissioned at a cost of circa £14,000. The original service books are present, as are the spare keys and the unused toolkit. All good things that I like to hear. Not much of a mention about the service history and paperwork, but that's okay. You can inquire about that sort of stuff. That's the benefit of an auction. Yeah, the auction itself happens over a day, but you can usually go and see the vehicle and ask questions and so on in advance. And the car is described as driving with no known faults. The 360 Spider with its manual gearbox is great to drive, has the V5C together with an MOT test, and it's valid until 2025. Today the Ferrari 360 Spider is appreciated not only for its performance but also for its timeless design and engineering. It serves as a key model in Ferrari's evolution towards modern sports cars, embodying the company's relentless pursuit of automotive excellence. Consigned by Stuart Banks. I had a look at this car and I thought, that price seems quite strong. That's the first thing that I thought. But that exhaust, I kept coming back to that exhaust and I kept looking at it and thinking, that I've known a lot of 360s. Look at the general condition of that engine bay. First off, that car could use a darn good clean. And if I were going to be selling a car, and at an auction as well, where you could get a lot more than you think, you could get a lot less than you think, you want to give every item, a fighting chance. If I'd sent my car to auction and they photographed it like this, I would be livid, because this is not showing this car in its best light. But that back box just kept bugging me, because that's not the sort of thing I'd expect to see on a pampered car that has spent a lot of time in storage. Now, there are certain other things that might weird people out, which actually are normal Ferrari things. Like, for example, the fact this still has, in the middle here, the indicator for the gear shift, which you'd get with the F1 cars. And you might think, has it been converted from F1 to manual? Which you can do on a 360, but it's kind of pointless, because, you know, unless it's a Stradale, just save the money and buy a manual one. No, this is normal. This is how Ferrari do it. So, of course, before any of us were going to think about putting any kind of money towards this car, we figured, right, sensible thing to do, let's do a CarVertical. They are my channel sponsor and a very handy service, because I thought, you know what, if anything is up with this car, the CarVertical will show it. So, ran the report and bingo, we got a yellow light here, which tells me there is something going on with the odometer. Now, at this point, I wasn't too worried, because it's an old Ferrari. And I tell you something, okay, with other cars, I would be more suspicious, but with Ferraris, it's very normal for them to have an issue with the odometer. There could be many, many reasons for it. One of the more popular ones is the fact that because the cars don't get used, sometimes the person doing the MOT check, who might not be familiar with the car, actually reads the trip counter and not the odometer. I've seen that a lot. Sometimes the cars can get switched between miles and kms, and so sometimes you'll see the number doing the right thing, but one test has written down miles, one test has written down kms, and then when software does its conversion, it looks like the mileage has been doing that the whole time. Or, and this actually happens with my own 550, the clocks can break. And, you know, it's a thing, particularly with the older cars, not so much with the 360s, but 355s and 550s. The clocks did just break, so it's not unheard of for the car to have a new clock installed, and provided, as I had with my 550, there is evidence and you can easily calculate the real mileage, it's not a problem. In the case of mine, we knew what had happened. I had the original clock with the mileage up until that point, and the new one in the car had the new mileage, and then we just combined the two together and basically put the car back to the mileage it should have been on. Very, very simple. Now, in other checks, the car all seemed pretty clear. It wasn't stolen, hasn't been imported, it's not been damaged, or certainly not been written off, not involved in natural disaster anywhere or anything like that. It's not got outstanding finance or anything like that on it, and its MOT is valid. More than that, it's only had the two owners that we can tell. The first had it from new, and then the second owner took it over in 2011. So that's a really, really good sign, because again, a car like this, if it's got a lot of owners, and remember, it's a 20-year-old car, so 7, 8, 9, 10 is not maybe unusual, but if it had, say, 17 or 18 owners, you got to start thinking, is something really wrong with this car? But everything seemed cool, except the mileage. So let's have a look. Beware, this car may have a fake mileage. Now, there are strengths and weaknesses to the CarVertical system. Its strength is how easily and simply it presents data, and the fact that it can give you the data for basically any car from not just Europe, but the Americas and many other parts of the world as well. The downside to it is that it's great at summarizing the data, but you do sometimes have to dig a little deeper to work out exactly what might have gone on. Because you can see here that we have the mileage for the car starting at basically nothing back in 2004, which then goes up to 15,690 by the time of its first MOT in 2007. At this point, the car is 3 years old, and that I would actually call potentially above average mileage for a newish Ferrari, but also not high enough to be concerned about. There are many that do more, many that do less. It's in there, you know, it's a Ferrari. They don't do 10,000 miles a year normally. By 2008, this is up to 20,000, so kind of carrying on the pattern, but then this slowed, and in 2009, it's up to 22,000 miles, but then things get a little bit weird. It goes to 56,000 miles for 2009. And this doesn't bother me. This is normal. This is what happens with these cars. You know, something's gone wrong, and you know, I saw that and I just thought, has someone put in the wrong digit? Did they put in a 5 rather than a 2? And they were expecting to put in 56,000 miles when actually they should have put in 26, because after 20, 22, 26 would make sense. Well, at the next marker here, which is in 2013, it's down to 12,000, which is odd. Now, they are my sponsors and I love them dearly, but like I said, CarVertical has strengths and weaknesses. It is excellent at giving you a summary of something. So for example, when the car has had an MOT. Again, look at this, 2009, in February, the car failed its MOT because the driver's door could not be opened from outside the vehicle. If you know 360s, you know exactly what's happened there. The cable snaps and I've seen it happen. It's just a thing. Doesn't mean the car is neglected, it just means it's a 360. But unfortunately, and I will be feeding this back to CarVertical, one thing that you don't get told here is the mileage at time of MOT. It uses this data to help feed the mileage timeline. But if you want to get this data, it's very easy and it's available for free. Many of you, I'm sure, already know this, from HM Government. You just go on the Check MOT History website, just Google check MOT history, it'll come up, and then you can ask for the MOT history of any vehicle that you like. So you put it in, yeah, black Ferrari 360, that's our character, this is what we want to know about. Tells me that it's got a current valid MOT, it's only just got one, which is great. And the last MOT, it was at 21,020 miles. So, okay, a few more miles than it was being advertised as over at Brooklands. However, if you look at the photographs that they're using, they simply use the photograph mileage to give the car's mileage. You know what? 100 miles here or there, I'm really not that worried about. But I want to know more about this anomaly in 2009. So you go back down through the history, and if you're looking at this, you might already have noticed what I have. Now, did you spot that? So, let's go right back to the beginning. First MOT, 2007, 15,500 miles for sake of argument. Cool, fine. Next MOT, 2008, 20,000 miles. Cool, great. Then, the next MOT a year later, in February 2009, not only does it fail, because they couldn't get into it, but it had 55,597 miles on the clock. So it's apparently done 35,000 miles in 12 months. Which seems unlikely. Then the next MOT, a month later in 2009, the car's back down to 22,390. Now, if that were the only thing in this car's history, I would have had no issues whatsoever with telling Chris to go and put a bid on it, because one off weird mileage anomaly in the MOT history is a Ferrari. It happens. And if you ignore that, that's what you got to do. Ignore the erroneous report and look at the ones that you believe to be correct. And in that case, you go, the mileage is 15, 20, 22. Sounds about right to me. However, then it gets really weird. First off, the car is presented for its MOT in August of that same year. It wouldn't be due for about another 6 months. And when it goes in, it again has super high mileage. 56,096 miles. So again, it's jumped up by about 34,000 miles. It's also failed this MOT. And it's failed because the front windscreen has a sticker on it. Okay, fine. You got a really hardcore tester that didn't like you, whatever. All right, okay. They sort the problem evidently on the day, because the very same day it also gets a pass. Still though, with 56,000 miles, which is odd. But then it gets really strange, because the car then goes 4 years before its next MOT. And you would have expected that if this mileage issue was sorted, that now the mileage would be on something like, you know, mid to high 20s. But instead, it's on 12,000 miles, 12,025, and it fails this MOT for a number of different reasons. The headlamps being in the wrong place, offside rear anti-roll bar bush having failed, the supplementary restraint warning airbag system basically giving a fault, and the car producing too much in terms of emissions. So quite a few things there, and they need sorting, which, to be honest, some of this is indicative of a car that just needs a bit of maintenance that it hasn't had, and some of which is indicative of a car that, you know, is just been dragged out of storage and thrown at the MOT station without much prep. But the bit I was focused on, of course, was the mileage. The car then gets another test in 2014 in October. So this is where the red flags really start getting waved strongly here, because now I go, okay, so the car didn't get properly fixed. The car then went nearly a year and then failed the next MOT for nearly all of the same reasons. It only then passes a week later in October, at which point the mileage is still wrong, 12,000. The next MOT then is another 4 years later in 2018, by which point the car has now done 16,000 miles. So it's done 4,000 miles in that time. Then in 2019, the car is up to just shy of 18,000 miles, fails another MOT, this time for tyres, then they're sorted and it gets passed. It then lays up for another 4 to 5 years before being tested in April of this year, when it does get a pass, but with some notes for rear tyres that presumably by this point are looking rather second-hand. It got another test later this year, presumably ahead of the auction, at which point no of the advisories are now mentioned, and the car is showing 21,000 miles. So we got a couple of mysteries here. First of which is, why did the car suddenly go up to 55,000 miles? Why then did it do it again? But the biggest one for me, by a country mile, is why, when it had that second issue and something went wrong with the mileage, did it then drop not to 20-odd thousand miles, where it should have gone, but to 12? You can then see, because the car was driven, the mileage going back up, as you would expect it to be for a car being driven on occasion. And there are, yes, big gaps here between MOTs, but it's a Ferrari, that does happen. They say they've just spent a load of money restoring it, or recommissioning it, so that might not be an issue, but that mileage to me, look at this, 16th of November 2024, so what, a month ago, it says the car has 21,020 miles. Whereas in 2009, the car has 22,390 miles. In other words, the car is currently being advertised as having about 1,400 miles less on it than it did 15 years ago. Now this is freely available, publicly accessible information that anybody that knows the vehicle's registration number can get access to. Now I did run another couple of other checks, because there are also things that you will not get with this free check that CarVertical will give you. For example, the old reg plates that the car might have been on. I always do a quick Google of the car's registration number, because sometimes you find interesting things. I ran both of the plates that this car had been on, and neither of them turned up anything of note. So curious about this, I emailed Mr. Banks over at the auction house. And I said, look, you've got this car up for sale and you're advertising it as having this mileage, but a couple of things have gone on in the past, and by my calculations, if what's happened is all that's happened and the car has been where it can accruing mileage honestly, I think you're advertising the car some 9,000 miles short of where it should be. And I worked that out very simply by just taking the mileage at what was, I think, the last genuine mileage MOT, and then looking at how much it had done since it was then sort of wound down versus the present day. And it's about 9,000 miles off. So that's more like a 30,000 mile car. So it's still, you know, reasonably low, but not a 21,000 mile car. And this rankled me, I'll be honest, because auction houses are a great way for people to just wash the history of a car. But these places charge a huge premium. In this case, it's 12% plus VAT, so 14 and a bit percent on top of the hammer price that's sold. And that's charged to the buyer, not the seller. So for example, if the car went for £50,000, you're going to pay on top £7 and a bit thousand of fees. And the reason I have such an issue with an auction house is I keep asking myself, why? What am I paying for? I totally understand a seller having a fee. That's normal when cars are sold. The seller takes the hit. As a buyer, I get wound up if I see a company saying they charge a £69 admin fee. I'm already paying you £30,000, £40,000 for your blooming car. Price it right. I will not pay admin fees on cars. They're a nonsense, awful charge. They're a very American thing, and I refuse to do it. I have threatened to not buy cars over it, and guess what? Every time you say they're going to lose 20 grand over 69 quid, they very suddenly forget about the 69 quid. If you're doing business so badly you need to charge on top, no, I'm not doing business with you. And the admin involved in buying and selling a car is very, very minimal. Like, just get your costs into the price of the car. Anyway, that's a whole separate topic. But these guys are charging thousands of pounds, if not a lot more, for big ticket items. And as far as I can see, all they're really doing is hiring a venue, sticking cars in and getting a man to go, sold. There's no real buyer protection. There's no real insurance. There doesn't seem to me, in this case, to be even the tiniest amount of effort towards transparency. If they just put in the advert, by the way, there are some oddities with the history of the car, something happened, and this is the displayed mileage, but we suspect it's not genuine, make up your own mind, I wouldn't have a problem with that. These things happen. I mean, I would hate for the car to be further neglected just because of this. But also, no way is that car worth 70,000 quid. On a good day 2 years ago, maybe, if it was genuine. But now, that's like a 40 to 50,000 pound car. Tops. So I emailed them saying, what's going on here? Maybe there is an answer, maybe there is a solution and I'm just missing it. And they came back and said, what happened was somebody jump-started the car, that fried the dash in a 360, the mileage is held in the dash, so when it went for its MOT, it had the dash from another car or a slave dash or whatever in it, which is, I suspect, true. That can happen. If you jump a 360, you should never jump an Italian supercar. You can fry things in them, including, in the case of the 360, the dash. I know this. I have seen it happen. I've known it happen to people that I'm friends with. And it's just one of these things. It's something you only ever do once because you learn the hard way why everybody tells you not to do it. And that would explain, no problem at all, first time round. Now, I don't understand why anybody would ever take any car to an MOT station displaying completely the wrong mileage, especially your Ferrari. They're such mileage sensitive cars. I mean, why would you do that? You're just going to cause problems, right? If not for yourself, then for whoever takes the car on next. What irks me is then, only a matter of months later, the car is back at an MOT it didn't even need to go to, but now with the same problem again, the same mileage fault, which means that either the repair they performed to the car didn't hold, the dash failed again, or somebody hadn't learned their lesson and they jumped the car again and broke it. Now, maybe, here's the one theory I've got. At this point in time, whoever had the car said, crying out loud, we've cooked the dash twice now, it's totally broken, or maybe it had been fixed, it got broken again, they had a spare one laying around, they chucked it on, got it MOT'd, why I don't know, but they did, and then they went, we're just going to need to replace the dash. And they replaced it with a second-hand dash, and the second-hand dash had a different mileage. That is a story that I could absolutely believe. Now, there are a whole bunch of nefarious reasons as to why you would change the mileage on a Ferrari or even block the mileage. I'm not sure I believe that somebody has deliberately tried to clock this car, because if they have done the most ham-fisted, awful job imaginable. It is clear to anybody that there is something very wrong with the mileage on this particular car. And it should have been blindingly clear to historics. I don't know why any half-decent auction house would want a car like that going through their auction. Or if they're going to have it, I think they have a duty of care to the people that are about to spend money, not just on the car, but with them, right? 14.4% with them should buy you some form of basic due diligence. Now, Chris very kindly watched this auction as it happened because both he and I were curious what was going to happen to this car. I'd been emailing the gentleman who was responsible for this listing, and I'd said to him, look, something's really wrong with this car. Now, it might still be a good car and one that's worth saving, but the price you're expecting is totally unrealistic. So if somebody does bid on it and win it, and then they choose to do their due diligence after the fact, and they find out this is not a 20,000 mile car, it's more like a 30,000 mile one at least, and they refuse to buy it, give us a call and maybe we'd like to make an offer, but it'll be an offer in line with what all of my friends in the trade tell me you pay for a clocked Ferrari. At this point in time, I've got no idea what supporting paperwork, history, evidence or anything is with that car. All I was ever told by historics is that this thing had happened and the dash had been basically, you know, wrecked by being jumped, and this is why there'd been an issue with the mileage and this is why it showed high. I asked several times, yes, I know that explains one incident, but I don't understand how the car's mileage can drop by some 10,000 miles and you not question it, you not think about this. Let's be honest here. One of two things is going to happen with this car if it is sold. That is, somebody buys it, been looking for their dream Ferrari, but thinks the only way they can afford it is at auction. So they bid maybe a bit more than they probably should have done. This car went to over £50,000 by the time bidding ended, which is way more than I thought anybody reasonable would have bid on it, because I thought they would have done their due diligence like I had. And so, you know, somebody might have bought that, their dream Ferrari, their perfect Ferrari, the car they've always wanted, the car they had as a kid, as a toy or whatever. And they're going to get that and go, hang on a minute, something's really wrong here. I've been had. And they're going to be real upset. And maybe with a car like this, I would not be surprised if there are a litany of other issues lurking below. And from experience, I can tell you, fixing problems with Ferraris is a lot more expensive than fixing problems with Boxsters. The other thing that would have happened to the car is it would have gone to a dealer who maybe already knew about the fact the mileage was a bit iffy, but also knew that it was being advertised as 20,000 miles by the auction house, so they might as well advertise it as 20,000 miles and hope that the next buyer doesn't do their due diligence. In either case, somebody is being done over here. And all it takes is just a scrap of honesty and a scrap of decency from this auction house. But for whatever reason, they saw fit to let the auction run. I fully expected that, you know, I emailed them, I told them, come on guys, what's going on here? This is really, really iffy. This doesn't look good on you. They let the auction run. Okay, all right, yeah, all right, great. But when I looked to see what the car had gone for, it actually still just has the reserve written down, which implies to me that it didn't sell at all. And so, if at some point in the near future you happen to see a black Ferrari 360 Spider manual on allegedly some 20,000 miles at your local Ferrari dealer, look really, really closely. See, I love Ferraris, I love supercars, I love all cars, but what I don't love is when people have their dream ruined because somebody, don't know really the logic, don't know the reasoning, decided to, well, they didn't choose to not do their due diligence. What I told these guys was no surprise to them. They knew it. But they just chose to omit it. There are a lot of words for what's going on there, and I don't like any of them. There's a chance that maybe I got the whole thing completely wrong, but based on the evidence that I have and the evidence I've presented to you today, I don't think that that is the case. And I was never ever given, we spoke for a couple of weeks, I was never ever given a satisfactory explanation for what was going on with this car. And this is not the only auction horror story I've got to tell over this season, but for the next one you'll have to wait a little longer. And that one, it's of a very different nature. But anyway, I hope you've enjoyed today's video. Don't forget to get your child, husband, sister, father, whatever, a Scalextric for Christmas, or if you really want to splash out, a nice NOVE watch. Discount code for these, not for these sadly, but the links for both are in the description. So that's it from me. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment down below, subscribe, help me get to that magic 400k. Can it happen by New Year? Let's hope. And I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.